I will never forget the moment it happened. We were at Universal Studios, standing right outside the entrance gates, the sun beating down, kids laughing all around us, music spilling from the speakers. I had been excited for this day. After everything I had gone through to make it possible, I thought maybe, just maybe, my father and I would finally share something that felt like family again. Then he turned to a group of people we'd just met in line. He placed his arm proudly around my stepbrother's shoulders, smiled wide, and said the words that froze me in place. "This is my only child." For a second, the world stopped. My ears rang. My heart dropped. My body felt heavy, like the ground had been pulled out from under me. I stood there, not even sure if I had heard him correctly. My only child. My stepbrother. Not me. Not the daughter who had drained her savings, skipped meals, and sold nearly everything she owned to save his life. I tried to laugh it off in my head, telling myself maybe he misspoke. Maybe it was just a slip. But the way he smiled at my stepbrother, the way he introduced him so easily, it wasn't a mistake. He meant it. And in that instant, everything I had sacrificed came crashing back in my mind like a cruel reminder. Because just months earlier, I had given my father $17,350. Money I didn't have. Money I scraped together for one reason only: his surgery. The surgery that gave him another chance at life. The surgery that kept him standing here, smiling today. And yet, in front of strangers, in front of me, he erased me with 6 simple words. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. But mostly, I wanted to vanish. Because at that moment, I wasn't his daughter. I was invisible. That's where my story begins, not with the surgery, not with the money, but with a betrayal. A betrayal that forced me to question what family really means. Is it blood? Is it loyalty? Or is it something much more fragile, something that can break the second someone decides you don't matter? I'm Joan. And this is the story of how I gave my father everything, only to learn I was nothing in his eyes. Subscribe now if you've ever sacrificed everything only to feel invisible in return. When I tell people about what happened at Universal, most of them look at me in shock and ask the same question. Why would you ever give that much money in the first place? So let me start from the beginning and introduce myself properly. My name is Joan. I am the daughter who saved her father's life with $17,350. I am the one who risked everything, not because I was wealthy or comfortable, but because I couldn't bear the thought of losing him. When my father first told me about his condition, I felt the ground fall from beneath me. The doctors said he needed surgery, serious surgery, and without it, his time was running out. He looked tired, defeated, and so much older than his age. And I knew at that moment, there wasn't a choice. I had to find a way. The truth is, I didn't have $17,350. I didn't even have a fraction of it. I was already living paycheck to paycheck, stretching each dollar as far as it could go. But when you're faced with losing a parent, logic disappears. You don't calculate. You don't think about your own needs. You just move. You act. And that's exactly what I did. I started by draining the little savings I had. That meant no safety net. No cushion if something went wrong. After that, I went through my apartment like a scavenger, pulling out anything I could sell. My laptop went first. Then my camera. Then the pieces of jewelry my mother had once given me. Each item sold felt like a piece of myself disappearing, but I told myself it was worth it. A computer can be replaced. A necklace is only metal. But my father's life? That was priceless. When that still wasn't enough, I started skipping meals. Some nights it was just bread and water. Other nights, nothing at all. My friends didn't know, because I smiled and said I was dieting. The truth was, I couldn't afford food if I wanted to meet my goal. Every dollar saved was a dollar closer to the surgery. There were moments when my body begged me to stop. I would wake up lightheaded, or faint in the shower. But then I'd remember the look on my father's face, the way he tried to stay strong when he told me about the surgery, and I'd keep going. I'd tell myself, this is love. This is what love looks like. I even gave up my dream of going back to school that year. I had been accepted into a program I'd wanted for years, but the tuition money I had saved went straight into my father's medical fund. My dream could wait, I told myself. His life could not. It wasn't easy. I cried often, but mostly in silence. I worked extra shifts. I borrowed small amounts where I could. And slowly, painfully, I reached it. $17,350. I can still see the number written down, the exact amount required, and the relief that washed over me when I realized I had finally gathered enough. Handing over that money was both the hardest and easiest thing I have ever done. Hard, because I knew what it had cost me. Easy, because I loved him. Because I believed that if he saw what I had done, if he truly understood the sacrifice, it would mean something. It would show him, beyond words, that I was his daughter in the deepest sense, not just by blood, but by loyalty, by devotion, by love. I thought it would bring us closer. I thought it would heal years of distance, erase the quiet disappointments, and maybe, just maybe, make him proud of me. I wanted to give him life, and in return, I hoped he would see me. Instead, months later, I stood at Universal Studios while he erased me in a single sentence. But before I get to that part, you have to understand what it cost me to save him. Because my sacrifice wasn't about money alone. It was about my identity, my dreams, my body, my pride. Every part of me went into that $17,350. And that's why his words cut so deep. Have you ever risked everything for your family without hesitation? People always say that family shapes you. And they are right. Mine shaped me in ways I'm still trying to understand. My parents divorced when I was still a child. It wasn't dramatic at first, just two adults who decided they couldn't stay together. But the divorce created cracks that never really healed. I stayed mostly with my father, and for a long time, I thought I was enough for him. I thought I was his whole world. That changed the day he remarried. His new wife brought along her son, my stepbrother, who was only a year younger than me. At first, I tried to be welcoming. I thought, okay, this is family now, this is what Dad wants, so I'll accept it. But acceptance was never a two-way street. My stepbrother fit into Dad's life like he had been waiting for the role all along. And me? I became the extra. The one who was tolerated, not celebrated. I remember small moments that should have been harmless but weren't. Like when Dad would take him shopping for sports gear, but tell me I didn't need anything. Or when birthdays rolled around, and my stepbrother got surprises, while mine felt like an afterthought. I told myself it didn't matter, that love wasn't measured in gifts or outings. But deep down, I noticed. Kids always notice. Even as we grew older, the pattern never really changed. Dad's attention leaned toward him. My stepbrother could make an average achievement, passing a test, scoring a goal, and Dad would beam with pride. When I accomplished something bigger, like winning a writing contest, Dad would nod politely and then change the subject. It hurt, but I stayed loyal. I clung to the idea that if I worked hard enough, if I proved my love, maybe he'd see me the way I saw him. Maybe he'd look at me and feel the same pride he reserved for his other child. The surgery only intensified those feelings. I told myself, this is my chance. This is the moment he'll finally recognize me. I had risked everything for him. I had given up comfort, security, and dreams. Who else in his life had done that? I wanted so badly for him to look at me and say, Joan, you're my daughter, my anchor, the reason I'm still here. But instead, even after the surgery, I noticed how often his gratitude tilted toward my stepbrother. When people visited the hospital, he would point out how supportive my stepbrother was, how strong he had been. I sat quietly in the corner, wondering if my father even remembered that I was the one who had written the check, the one who had sold my own belongings, the one who had bled for his survival in ways no one could see. I kept smiling, though, because love does that. It convinces you to swallow the pain, to keep showing up, even when the spotlight never touches you. I can still remember one conversation, weeks after the surgery, when Dad told a family friend, I don't know what I'd do without him. He meant my stepbrother. My stomach twisted, but I forced myself to stay calm. I told myself, he doesn't mean it like that. He's just talking. But the words burned anyway. It was like standing in a room where you're screaming, but no one hears you. Like you're invisible, even though you've given everything you have. Still, I stayed. I called to check on him. I visited. I kept sacrificing. Because no matter how overlooked I felt, I wanted my father's love. I wanted him to see me, really see me, the way every daughter hopes her father will. And maybe that's what makes what happened at Universal Studios so devastating. It wasn't just one careless comment. It was the echo of years. It was every moment I had been brushed aside, wrapped into one sentence. Only child. That's what he called my stepbrother. Not me. Not us. Him. And standing there, hearing it, I realized all the sacrifices in the world couldn't force recognition out of someone who chose not to see me. The morning of my father's surgery is burned into my memory. Hospitals always smell the same, antiseptic and fear. I sat in the waiting room clutching my phone like it was a lifeline, watching the clock tick minute by minute. Every sound made me jump. Every doctor who walked past, I wanted to grab and ask, "Is he alive? Is he okay?" I had spent weeks preparing for this moment. Not just financially, but emotionally. Every cent of that $17,350 came from my sacrifice, and now it all narrowed down to this day. I whispered silent prayers, bargaining with the universe. Let him live. I don't care if I get the credit. I just need him here. The surgery took hours. Each one dragged like a lifetime. When the doctor finally walked out and said the words, "He made it through," I felt my knees give out. Relief hit me like a tidal wave. My father was alive. I had bought him more time, and nothing felt bigger than that. I thought, in that moment, everything between us would change. I thought he would see me, finally, for who I was, the daughter who moved mountains for him. But the reality was quieter, colder. When I went into his room for the first time after recovery, he smiled weakly, reached for my hand, and said, "Thanks for being here." It was polite. It was soft. But it wasn't the recognition I had imagined. No mention of the sacrifice. No acknowledgement that I had nearly broken myself to keep him alive. I told myself not to care. I told myself, he's weak, he's recovering, don't expect too much right now. Then other people began to visit. Relatives came by with flowers, and coworkers sent cards. And every time someone asked how he was doing, my father would light up and say, "I couldn't have done this without him." He met my stepbrother. I was sitting right there, sometimes holding his hand, sometimes refilling his water cup, and he kept pointing to my stepbrother. Talking about how strong he'd been, how he had kept everyone updated, how he had supported him through the ordeal. I wanted to scream. Supported him? Who had written the check? Who had emptied her bank account? Who had skipped meals, sold belongings, swallowed every ounce of pride to pull together that $17,350. Me. But the praise flowed in one direction. My stepbrother soaked it up, nodding humbly, like he deserved it. And I sat there invisible, trying not to let the tears burn through my composure. One moment still stings. An aunt leaned over to hug my father and said, "You're lucky to have such devoted children." And my father corrected her, "Child. He's the one who's been here for me." I froze. I told myself he was medicated, that he wasn't thinking clearly. But the words pierced deeper than the scalpel that had cut him open. Even as days passed and he grew stronger, the pattern didn't change. He would talk about how grateful he was, how blessed he felt, but his gratitude always seemed to skip over me. He didn't mean to be cruel, maybe. But cruelty doesn't always need intention, it only needs repetition. I kept showing up. I adjusted his pillows, helped him to the bathroom, called nurses when he needed them. I brought homemade soup when he was discharged. And still, when relatives called to check in, he would tell them, "My boy has been incredible." I wasn't the boy. I wasn't the one he mentioned. Each time, my heart cracked a little more. I thought saving his life would cement our bond. Instead, it exposed the truth. No matter how much I gave, no matter how far I bent, I might never be enough for him. But I kept telling myself to wait. Maybe when he was fully healed, when he had perspective, he would see what I had done. He would look at me with pride. He would say the words I had been longing for my whole life. "You're my daughter, and I love you for everything you are." I clung to that hope, even as it slipped further away. Looking back now, those hospital days were the foreshadowing I ignored. The warning signs were clear. I was being erased, piece by piece, even as I poured everything into him. And I should have known then that the day at Universal Studios would shatter me completely. When my father first mentioned the idea of a family trip to Universal Studios, I felt something stir inside me that I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. He said it would be a celebration of his recovery, a chance to breathe fresh air and make new memories together. I latched onto those words, because after all I had done, I wanted nothing more than to be seen, to finally be part of his proud stories. I told myself this trip could be the turning point. Maybe he would look at me differently, maybe he would see more than the daughter who quietly gave everything in the background. Maybe he would notice that without me, there wouldn't even be a recovery to celebrate. So I started planning. I pored over ticket prices, looked up hotel options, and even offered to cover part of the expenses despite still climbing out of the financial hole left by his surgery. I convinced myself it would be worth it. Every late night spent searching online felt like a step closer to something bigger: belonging. I imagined walking beside him, hearing him laugh, maybe introducing me to someone with pride in his voice. I imagined his hand on my shoulder, the way parents sometimes do when they want the world to know, this is my child. But even as I built up these dreams, small cracks showed through. At dinner, he would say things like, "We'll need to make sure your brother has the right sneakers for all that walking." Or, "I know how much he's been wanting to ride those roller coasters." The he was always my stepbrother. I was in the room too, but his excitement rarely included me directly. I brushed it off. I told myself not to be sensitive. It wasn't about who he mentioned first, it was about us going as a family. In the weeks leading up to the trip, I even bought a new outfit. Nothing extravagant, just something casual that I thought would look nice in photos. I wanted to look like someone worth being proud of. As the departure day drew closer, my emotions were a mix of anticipation and quiet nerves. I was stepping into this trip with my heart open, even though the past had taught me how easily it could be bruised. I wanted this to be different. On the morning we left, I remember watching my father fuss over my stepbrother's backpack. He double-checked his snacks, his sunscreen, his hat. Then he glanced at me, smiled faintly, and said, "Ready?" That small smile meant more to me than I wanted to admit. I clung to it like proof that maybe, deep down, he really did care. As we loaded into the car, my chest swelled with cautious optimism. This was our chance, our fresh start. And yet, somewhere in the back of my mind, I couldn't shake the question: would this trip finally make me feel like I belonged, or would it remind me of how invisible I truly was? The day at Universal Studios started out like something I'd been waiting for my whole life. The air was thick with excitement, the smell of popcorn, the sound of laughter echoing through the park, the sight of families clustered together, snapping photos. Everywhere I looked, I saw fathers lifting their children onto their shoulders, mothers tucking stray strands of hair behind their daughters' ears. I let myself believe for a moment that this was my chance to be part of that picture. We moved together through the park, my father, my stepbrother, and me. I stayed close, trying not to drift behind, not wanting to look like the outsider I sometimes felt. I told myself, today will be different. Today, he'll notice me. It happened so quickly I almost didn't catch it at first. We were standing in line for one of the rides when my father struck up a conversation with another family next to us. They asked if this was his first visit. He smiled and said, "Yes, it's a special trip. I wanted to bring my only child here." And then he gestured toward my stepbrother. Only child. The words slammed into me like a physical blow. My breath caught in my chest, and I froze. I wanted to believe I misheard him, that maybe the noise of the park had twisted his words. But no. He was smiling with pride, his hand resting firmly on my stepbrother's shoulder as if stamping those words into the air, undeniable. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my heart pounding in my ears. At that moment, I wasn't his daughter. I wasn't the one who had drained her savings, skipped meals, sold her belongings, and handed him $17,350 to keep him alive. I was nobody. The family he was speaking to shifted awkwardly. Their eyes flicked toward me, then back at him, then at my stepbrother. I saw the faint crease of confusion on their faces. They didn't know where to look. They didn't know how to react. But their discomfort was confirmation. I wasn't imagining it. I had been erased, right there in front of strangers. I forced a weak smile, pretending I hadn't heard. But inside, something was shattering. I kept replaying that number in my head, $17,350. Every dollar carried a story. The nights I went to bed hungry. The belongings I sold, watching pieces of my life disappear. The dreams I shelved because my father's life meant more to me than my own plans. And now, standing in the heart of the park, all those sacrifices seemed invisible. I tried to swallow the lump in my throat, but it wouldn't go away. My chest tightened, my eyes burned, and I felt small, smaller than I had ever felt. I wanted to scream, "I'm your daughter. I'm the one who saved you. I'm the reason you're standing here, breathing, laughing, smiling." But the words never left my mouth. Instead, I stayed silent, my pain hidden beneath a thin mask of composure. I laughed when others laughed. I walked when the line moved forward. I kept my hands folded, holding myself together because I was terrified that if I let go, I'd crumble into pieces right there on the concrete. The ride itself passed in a blur. I couldn't tell you what it was or what it felt like. All I remember is staring at the floor, hearing his laughter with my stepbrother beside him, and feeling like a ghost. By the time we stepped off, the day had lost its magic. The colors of the park seemed muted, the noise too sharp, the people around me too close yet too far away. I had never felt more alone. And the question that wouldn't stop circling in my mind was this: how could a father erase his daughter in front of the world after she had given him everything? I didn't lash out. Not right away. On the surface, I stayed quiet, blending into the crowd as if nothing had happened. My father walked ahead, his voice loud and warm, filling the space with laughter as he guided my stepbrother toward the next attraction. His hand remained planted on the boy's shoulder like a badge of honor, as though he carried with him the one and only pride of his life. And me? I trailed a step behind, invisible. Inside, it felt like something was clawing at me, a storm that refused to let up. My chest was on fire, my throat ached, and the betrayal replayed on a loop. My only child. I could still hear the words, crisp and final, like a sentence carved into stone. I kept waiting for him to turn back, to glance over his shoulder, catch my eyes, and say something, anything, to pull me back into the fold. A smile. A word. Even a careless pat on the arm. But he didn't. He never looked back. I watched his face, how easily it lit up when my stepbrother spoke, how quickly he leaned in to hear his stories, how he laughed at every small joke. My stepbrother seemed smug at times, shoulders squared, chest out, relishing the attention. Other times he looked too innocent, unaware of the dagger those words had driven into me. I couldn't decide which one it was, smugness or ignorance. But either way, it hurt. I stayed silent because the alternative scared me. If I opened my mouth, what would come out? Anger? Tears? A trembling voice too weak to defend itself? The idea of breaking down in the middle of Universal Studios, in front of strangers, was unbearable. So I chose silence. The silence was heavy, though. It pressed down on me with every step, with every laugh that excluded me, with every gesture that made me smaller. I tried to hold myself together by studying the world around me. The rides spinning in the distance. Children shrieking with joy. The way families clutched each other's hands so tightly it almost hurt to look. I noticed details I shouldn't have cared about. The sweat forming on my father's temple, the way his shirt clung to his back, the rhythm of his steps. These small things became anchors, pulling me out of the storm inside, forcing me to focus on something, anything, that wasn't the pain burning through me. But no matter what I looked at, my thoughts always circled back. How could he erase me? How could he stand here, alive because of me, and pretend I don't exist? It wasn't just about the words. It was about the history behind them. Every time he overlooked me in the past. Every moment when his pride was directed elsewhere. Every sacrifice I had made in silence, believing one day he would see me. Those words had confirmed the truth I had been too afraid to face. Maybe he never would. I walked behind them for what felt like hours, my body present but my spirit elsewhere. On the outside, I looked calm, eyes steady, steps measured, hands at my sides. But inside, I was shattered. My heart was a mess of sharp edges, each beat cutting deeper. There were moments when I almost spoke up. The words gathered at the edge of my tongue, begging to be released. Dad, I'm your daughter. Don't you see me? But I swallowed them down again and again. Speaking up would expose how broken I felt. And maybe, worse, it would give him the chance to dismiss me one more time. So I let the silence hold me. It was my armor, my only way to keep from collapsing in front of everyone. By the time we sat down for lunch, my appetite had vanished. I picked at the food on my plate, pushing fries around with my fork, watching my father beam at my stepbrother across the table. Every laugh they shared was a reminder of what I wasn't. My stepbrother noticed me at one point. His eyes met mine, curious, almost questioning. Did he understand? Did he realize the weight of what had just happened? Or was he basking in the glow of being the only child? I couldn't tell, and I didn't have the energy to find out. I excused myself early, saying I needed some air. No one stopped me. No one asked if I was okay. I walked out into the open, the sounds of the park rushing back around me. Screams from rides, music blaring from speakers, the chatter of tourists. It all felt too loud, like it was mocking the quiet ache inside me. I stood there alone, watching families pass by, and the question settled heavy in my chest. What am I to him? A daughter? A stranger? A shadow? I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't keep pretending it didn't hurt. I waited until the day wound down, until the crowds began to thin and the sun melted into the horizon, painting Universal Studios in soft gold. I had carried the weight of those words all day, and the silence had started to feel like a cage. When my stepbrother darted off toward a shop with a souvenir stand, it was my moment. My father and I were alone, standing near a bench by the gates. I turned to him, my voice steady but colder than I expected. Dad, can I ask you something? He looked at me, distracted, still smiling from the excitement of the day. Sure, Joan. What's up? I held his eyes. I didn't blink. Why did you introduce him as your only child? The words dropped heavy between us. His smile faltered. For a moment, he looked confused, like he hadn't even realized what he'd said. Then his brow furrowed. Oh, come on, Joan. Don't take things so literally. It was nothing. Nothing? I repeated, my voice sharpening. You called me nothing. You erased me. And you did it after I gave you $17,350 to keep you alive. He froze. His mouth opened, then closed again. He wasn't expecting me to bring up the money. He wasn't expecting me to speak at all. I stepped closer. Do you even realize what I gave up for you? I skipped meals. I sold things that mattered to me. I threw away dreams I'd been building for years. And I did it because you're my father. Because I thought saving your life meant something. I thought it meant I mattered to you. His hands went into his pockets. He shifted his weight, eyes darting to the ground. Joan, you don't understand. No, I cut in. I understand perfectly. You've been doing this for years. Favoring him. Praising him. Acting like I'm just the extra child in the background. And I kept telling myself it didn't matter. That if I stayed loyal, one day you'd see me. One day you'd recognize what I give. But today, you looked strangers in the eye and said he was your only child. Do you have any idea what that felt like? His face tightened. I didn't mean it like that. You're twisting this. I laughed bitterly. Twisting it? You said the words. They weren't an accident. They were the truth you've been carrying all along. Silence fell. He looked at me, his jaw set, searching for something to defend himself with. I was caught in the moment, he muttered finally. You know I didn't mean to hurt you. I shook my head slowly. Intentions don't erase the impact. You erased me, Dad. You erased your own daughter in front of everyone. For the first time, I saw him shrink. His shoulders slumped. His voice softened, almost pleading. Joan, you've always been different. Stronger. I knew you didn't need constant praise the way he does. The excuse burned worse than the insult. Stronger doesn't mean invisible. Stronger doesn't mean I deserve less love. Do you hear yourself? You're telling me that because I don't beg for scraps of affection, you think it's okay to forget me. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His defenses were cracking. I stood taller, steadier. My hands no longer trembled. I didn't give you that money to buy your love. I gave it because I thought you'd value your life enough to value me in return. But today showed me the truth. I can pour everything I have into you, and you'll still see me as second best. Or maybe not even that. He swallowed hard, his eyes finally lifting to mine. There was shame there, faint but undeniable. Joan, I didn't realize how much I hurt you. I felt the tears burn behind my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I wasn't here to collapse. I was here to draw a line. You hurt me because I loved you enough to sacrifice. And you didn't even hesitate to erase me. That's not love. That's convenient. And I won't keep giving myself away to a man who refuses to see me. His lips parted as if he wanted to argue, to throw up another excuse. But nothing came. He stayed silent. For the first time in my life, the silence wasn't mine to bear. It was his. I stepped back, feeling the weight lift from my chest. The storm inside me had quieted. I wasn't invisible anymore, not because he had finally seen me, but because I had forced myself to speak. It didn't matter whether he admitted the truth. I had seen it. I had named it. And I wasn't going to let it consume me again. As my stepbrother reappeared, waving his new souvenir, I turned and walked ahead. For once, I didn't wait to be noticed. The rest of the trip felt like walking on glass. Conversations were clipped, smiles forced, and the air between us heavy with what had been said. My father avoided my eyes most of the time. When he did look at me, it was quick, as if glancing at a wound he didn't know how to treat. My stepbrother noticed the change too. He wasn't smug this time. Instead, he looked caught in the middle, his usual ease with my father muted by an awkward restraint. He never asked me directly what had happened, but I caught him studying me when he thought I wasn't paying attention. Meals were quieter. Even laughter in the park rides felt half-hearted. My father tried to push us through the motions of family fun, but the word family no longer meant the same thing. It had cracks now, and I couldn't unsee them. That night, lying in the hotel room, I replayed everything in my mind. The $17,350. The skipped meals, the nights I stayed awake, calculating how I'd pay my own bills while saving his life. The way I had convinced myself that if I just gave enough, sacrificed enough, he would finally see me as his daughter. And then that one sentence at Universal, my only child. It rang like a final verdict. I realized how many years I had spent trying to prove my love. How many times I had smiled through his favoritism, telling myself it didn't matter. I remembered birthdays when he praised my stepbrother's achievements while skipping over mine. I remembered holidays where he bought my stepbrother an expensive gift and handed me something small, saying, "You're practical, you don't need much." I remembered every time he said you're strong, but what he meant was you don't deserve tenderness. The weight of all those moments pressed on me. But for the first time, instead of crushing me, it began to shift into something else. Self-respect. I saw clearly that my silence had been part of the problem. By swallowing every slight, by excusing every erasure, I had trained him to believe I would never speak up, that I would always settle for the scraps of his affection. But now I had broken that cycle. I had spoken. I had forced him to look at the truth, whether he wanted to or not. In the morning, when I joined them for breakfast, the tension was still there. My father made small talk with my stepbrother about the rides they wanted to try again. He asked me if I wanted coffee but avoided deeper conversation. I didn't push. I didn't beg. I didn't try to win back his favor. For the first time, I chose myself. I sat with my coffee, held my head high, and let the silence sit where it belonged. By the time the trip ended, nothing had been fixed. He hadn't apologized in full, and maybe he never would. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't desperate for his validation anymore. I didn't need him to name me as his daughter to know I was one. My worth wasn't up for him to decide. When we parted ways at the airport, I hugged him lightly. He hesitated, as if unsure how to respond. My stepbrother mumbled a goodbye, still unsure where he fit in the tension. And I walked away with a strange sense of peace. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't leaving empty. I was leaving with myself intact. Respect and dignity, two things I had always pushed aside in the hope of gaining love, finally stood in front. And I promised myself I would never let them slip to the back again. Back home, the silence of my apartment felt different. It wasn't lonely anymore. It was healing. For so long, my life had been filled with noise, his approval I chased, the comparisons I endured, the sacrifices I justified. But now, for the first time, I could breathe without waiting for recognition. I replayed the confrontation in my mind. The look on my father's face when I told him what that one sentence had done to me. The way his words stumbled, his excuses thin. It hadn't been the apology I longed for, but it was enough to remind me that my voice carried weight. That he could no longer pretend I didn't exist. A quiet strength filled me. I didn't need him to rewrite the past. I didn't even need him to fix the present. What mattered was that I had chosen myself. I thought about the $17,350. The skipped meals, the things I sold, the opportunities one had lost. For weeks, that number had haunted me. But slowly, I began to see it differently. It wasn't money thrown into the void. It was proof of my capacity for love. It was proof of how much I was willing to give. And though my father failed to honor it, the sacrifice wasn't wasted. Because it taught me the value of my heart. Every time I caught myself slipping into bitterness, I reminded myself, love without respect is incomplete. A relationship where one gives and the other takes without acknowledgement is not family, it's a cage. And I had finally broken free. The days that followed felt lighter. I'd journal every night, pouring out the years of silence I had carried. I talked with a friend who reminded me that loyalty must never cost self-worth. I stood in front of the mirror and spoke my own name with pride. Joan. Not invisible. Not erased. A daughter, a woman, a person who deserved to be seen. I didn't stop loving my father. That was the hardest truth to accept. Love doesn't vanish with betrayal. But I changed the way I gave it. No more endless sacrifices without recognition. No more begging for scraps of affection. If he wanted me in his life, he would have to meet me with respect. For once, the balance tilted in my favor. And it felt like a release. One evening, walking home after work, I realized I wasn't carrying the same heaviness anymore. The betrayal at Universal still hurt, but it no longer defined me. It had become a turning point, not a prison. And for the first time in years, I smiled, not because someone had given me approval, but because I had finally given it to myself. I think back to the number that defined so much of this story, $17,350. It wasn't just money. It was my youth, my strength, my late nights working, my skipped meals, my silent prayers. It was every choice I made to hold my family together. And yet, all of it dissolved in a single careless moment, when my father, in front of strangers, erased me from the story. The betrayal at Universal wasn't about money. It wasn't even about my stepbrother. It was about recognition. It was about respect. A child needs to know that their sacrifices matter, that their love is seen. When that is denied, something inside shatters. Confronting him was not easy. I had rehearsed the words for years, yet when the moment came, my voice was steady. I laid out the truth, what I gave, what I lost, what I endured. His face wavered between shock and defense. He had no real answer, because there was none. That day, I learned the hardest truth. Sacrifices lose meaning when respect is denied. Love without dignity is not love, it is bondage. As I look back now, I realize that my mistake wasn't loving too much. It was allowing love to blind me to my own worth. I thought sacrifice would buy me belonging. I thought endurance would earn me recognition. I thought silence was proof of strength. But silence only allowed the disrespect to grow. The confrontation didn't change my father completely. He didn't suddenly rewrite the past or shower me with the gratitude I had long craved. But it changed me. I stopped begging to be seen. I stopped measuring myself through his acknowledgement. I stopped proving what was already true. I mattered. The journey left me with questions I still wrestle with. How do you measure love? Is it in the size of the sacrifice, or in the respect that follows? What happens when the people you protect become the very ones who deny you? I don't have all the answers, but I know this. You must never give so much of yourself that you disappear. Today, I carry the lesson with me everywhere. I am more careful about where I place my loyalty. I protect my dignity before I protect someone's comfort. And I remind myself that love is not proven in silence, but in balance. If the person you saved erased you in public, would you forgive or walk away? That is the question I leave with you. Subscribe now for more stories of family, respect, and standing your ground. Share below, have you ever made a sacrifice that went unrecognized?